Welcome back to The Lead. We continue with our politics lead. Joining me now to discuss the loss of Scalia, the fallout from his death, and the high-stakes dance that is the nomination process to the Supreme Court, CNN senior legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin and Shannon Coffin, who was counsel to Vice President Dick Cheney. Jeff, if I could start to you, Republicans determined not to allow a vote on a Supreme Court nominee. Is that possibly a reason for a judge who President Obama might nominate to say, listen, that's a battle I don't want to go through. I'll wait for the next president?
Not at all. Out of the question. You know, President Obama is not going to give up one of the key responsibilities that a president has, which is to nominate individuals to the Supreme Court. Now, the Senate has a constitutional obligation to advise and consent, to vote up or down. But a president is not going to unilaterally disarm because he might lose a fight. This is something that the president's going to do, and if the Republicans are going to stop him, they're going to stop him, but he's not going to stop himself.
Shannon, there's a lot of speculation, and we're only 48 hours in. There'll be a lot more, right? And the president still has to make a move. He's going to wait until after the Senate recess. Looking at the landscape, is there a candidate, a Goldilocks candidate, that the president nominee could choose to get enough Republican votes to get through?
I'm not sure we can game that out at this point. I mean, the battle lines have sort of been drawn on the Hill, and the president's going to have to make a decision as to whether A, he wants to have a good old-fashioned confirmation battle, or he wants to have an electoral battle, right?
Make a point, right?
That's right. So he may try to go with someone that he views as confirmable. He may try to simply make the point for November, and the beauty of that is that's kind of the system that our founders had in mind when they divided these.
Wait a second,
labor.
Jeff, I hear you wanted to pipe in.
I don't understand that. I don't understand that at all. What does it mean to have an electoral? I mean, when you have Republicans saying they will not consider anyone, no matter who it is, what does it mean to pick a confirmable choice?
Well, look. I mean, Jeff. There's been a lot of talk in the media about people that have been, confirmed by high counts and to lower courts. So, there's some conventional wisdom out there that those are the sorts of nominees that the president might go with, but he might not go with that sort of nominee at all.
And you think that if he picks a Sri Srinivasan or a Jane Kelly, both of whom were confirmed unanimously, you think those people might have a chance in the current Senate?
Look. The point about those sorts of nominees is the very point that that we can make with respect to Elena Kagan, who was pitched as a moderate, and the setup to this very piece has said that we have a very solid 4-vote block on the liberal side of the court. That's because Elena Kagan has not been a moderate. She has voted lockstep with the other liberals on the court.
Jeff, let me ask you that question because I know you feel strongly, and this is in the Constitution, the president's right to nominate here. Practically, knowing the division right now, do you see that a Sri Srinivasan? You mentioned a couple candidates there who did get unanimous support, but again, this is a Supreme Court justice. It's a different level. Do you see a candidate who could peel enough Republican votes away to get confirmation?
The Goldilocks candidate, which you were referring to.
Yes.
Absolutely not. I don't think such a person exists. I think the Republican Party is dug in on a position that Barack Obama is not going to fill this seat with Goldilocks or anyone else. And I think that's the end of the story. I just, these seats are too important to the base of the Republican Party to let Barack Obama fill it in the last year of his presidency when they have the chance to run out the clock. So I think it's interesting who President Obama is going to nominate, but the idea that this person will ascend to the bench of the Supreme Court before Barack Obama leaves office seems just fanciful.
And Jeff, I'm not sure. I don't think we disagree on that at all. Yeah. My point was simply, there's a political calculation going on in the White House, and that's going to determine who the nominee is, but it probably isn't going to change the result.
Well, to be fair, the political calculations, I'm sure, going on both sides at this point. Shannon Coffin, Jeffrey Toobin, thanks very much.